Hello. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining our panel today. The title is In the Front Line of Help, Humanitarian Assistance in Direct Conflict Zones. We're very fortunate to have a fantastic group of panelists. But first, I'd also like to thank the organizers, Adam, Claudia, Bart, for setting this up. This is fantastic, absolutely amazing. And so we'll start with Andre all the way at the end. If you just want to introduce yourself, tell us about your organization, tell us what you do, and your experiences. Just in a brief introduction, and then we'll get into questions.
Thanks, Oliver. I'm Andriy Dobryansky. A slight last-minute addition if you don't see me on the website. I'm with the Ukrainian Congress Committee of America, the Ukrainian World Congress, who's been doing a lot of work both before and after. As we've heard in the earlier panels, this is the 9th year of the war, so we've been involved on the ground since before 2022. And most recently, I've been working with the wonderful people at Task Force Antal with the initiatives of the George Pataki Center, which could be found on georgepatakicenter.com.
Tamara?
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Oliver. For me, it's a great honor to participate in a panel discussion with all the distinguished experts. And it's a great honor for me also to represent our resilient, agile team of volunteers who work on the front line for our charity is called Food for Life Ukraine. What we do is we just feed people all over Ukraine, and especially on the front lines as well. We have a lot to say, to share. We have a short video also to show to all of you about our activities, and how we will do it later on.
Here's the video right now, so we're going to play that tomorrow.
Oh yeah, great. So I can tell something, yeah? More
Please.
Details about what we do. Basically what we do is we feed people, and we feed people with freshly cooked. So we cook on a spot and distribute, or sometimes we transport. We cook on spot in the cities, in the towns and villages, and also organize humanitarian expeditions to the deoccupied villages. So it's kind of a field kitchen we can deploy on spots there. We have quite a widespread network of volunteers. At the beginning of the war, we had more than 500 volunteers all over Ukraine, and we were distributing 20,000 meals per day. During that 1.5 years, we already counted that it's around 2 million portions of freshly cooked food that we distributed in Ukraine. Psychologists call it the first psychological aid, what we do, because we do not only fulfill people's physical needs of hunger, but also fulfill their psychological needs of being valuable. We help them overcome frustration and dread just by the relationship with people. So it's more kind of, so for us, food is a means to reach people's heart. Our organization was established actually quite a long time ago. It's an international mission. It was founded in 1974 by the founder of International Society for Krishna Consciousness, and it was envisioned as a service to humanity. It was a spiritual mission, and now this mission was replicated in almost 60 countries. But in Ukraine, we function as a separate local organization inspired by those ideas of the service of humanity and feeding people. Before the war, we were working on a really small scale, just 4 or 5 cities, and we were working together close with the social health centers for social help, and we were feeding like poor people, from underprivileged people. But from the outbreak of the war, we expanded drastically, and now we are all over Ukraine. That's it. Yeah, we still have some photos and videos to show, but I think you got the idea. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tamara. Michael?
Thank you. My name is Michael Capponi. I'm the president and founder of Global Empowerment Mission. So we have many different types of things that we do, from distribution of aid on large scale across the entire front line, and then reconstruction and windows. We're going to show a quick little video here of an analysis, an overview of our frontline work and our infrastructure in Ukraine. You could turn up the sound on this, please.
Every day along the front lines of Ukraine, millions of families struggle with the reality of daily explosions, unstable food supplies, resource scarcity, and their overall well-being. GEM, in partnership with the Howard G. Buffett Foundation, has significantly ramped up production of family necessity kits to support these vulnerable communities. These critical food and hygiene supplies act as a lifeline for families caught inside the conflict zones. GEM is now servicing over 100,000 families per month in the most vulnerable regions of the Donbas, Zaporizhia, Kherson, and Kharkiv front lines. Hundreds of Ukrainian volunteers displaced from the war are now being empowered to support those who cannot leave the conflict zones. In the first quarter of 2023, GEM, in partnership with HGBF, have distributed 1,688 truckloads of vital supplies. The supplies are packed and loaded from our Kyiv warehouse and loaded onto semi-trucks and vans, and then transported many hours across country out east. These journeys are long and difficult, but essential to reach these civilians who are cut off from local economies or access to assistance. GEM regularly services hundreds of these frontline communities, performing multiple distributions per day throughout many oblasts. The front line of the war in Ukraine is roughly 600 miles long. GEM and the Howard G. Buffett Foundation are continuing to ramp up production of family necessity kits, restoring hope to the lives of millions of people all throughout Ukraine.
I'm going to get back to questions about logistics, Michael, because you've built a fantastic logistical network, and I definitely have a lot of questions about it, so we'll get back to it. Christine.
Good morning. Thank you, Oliver. I'm very happy to be here with all the panel members and at this great summit. I am one of the co-founders of Task Force Antal, which is a nonprofit based in the U.S. with incorporation in both Hungary and Ukraine. We are a team of U.S. Army veterans and NATO partner force veterans from the Special Operations community. I personally served in Ukraine for 7 years as the primary legal advisor to our security cooperation and building partnership capacity programs prior to the war. And so when the invasion started, our teams of special operators wanted to be in Ukraine and helping. We were helping to move U.S. personnel and U.S. Ukrainian diaspora family members out of Ukraine, and then we've morphed into providing first aid supplies and training across the country to civilian populations as well as vulnerable infrastructure, like the railroads and the energy sector to their staffs at critical infrastructure. So there's Andriy, one of our partners, right, doing tourniquet training. But we teach very basic level 1 first aid, not TCCC for those familiar with that. And we distribute tens of thousands of IFACs after our training. We ensure that we provide the training, the requisite training to save lives and be first responders within communities that are getting hit with unlawful targeting of homes and villages. So I'm very happy to be here. Thank you, Oliver.
Thank you. Victor, please.
Good day. My name is Viktor Shevchenko. So first of all, before the invasion, I'm a CEO of international logistic company. in Ukraine, but since 24th of February 2022, I am a logistic officer in headquarters of TDF. TDF, who don't know, is Territorial Defense Forces of Armed Forces of Ukraine.
Thank you all for being here. I'll start with a question for Christine. So one of the challenges, and Michael, maybe you can chime in on this, so this can be a question for both of you, but you have US-based entities. Do you face customs challenges, customs regulations, and how do your American volunteers, how do they tackle border crossings in various regions, or do you face any difficulties in this aspect?
Do you want to go on? So thanks, Oliver. I think for us, because of our long-standing, or since 2014, our presence and experience in Ukraine has facilitated our ability to cross border and work with our local national partners and colleagues. In terms of visas and residency visas for our long-term teammates, we just work through the central government to ensure residence visas, and that was one of the reasons why we did incorporate the nonprofit within Ukraine, so that we have a subsidiary there that can serve as our host nation location. In terms of customs, we have really great logistics relationships throughout the eastern seaboard in the United States, that then one of our offices is co-located, one of our offices and warehouses is co-located with a customs processing center, so that also speeds up and facilitates our crossing. But we're very careful in terms of proper export licensing and ensuring compliance with both our international and sanctions laws and whatnot, right, in terms of certifying our stuff before it leaves the United States to come to Ukraine for distribution.
Michael, I might redirect this to you as well, because I mean, the logistics network you built is phenomenal. Yep. And so, but when you were setting up in Ukraine, did you have any of these issues? And if you did, how did you tackle them?
So when we first got to Poland, we set up a headquarters in Rzeszów and in Warsaw. We had a 30,000 square foot warehouse there that we still have. And we needed a consignee because we weren't registered in Poland yet. So we used First Lady Jolanta Kwasieniewska, right, the former First Lady of Poland. She was our consignee. And so we basically technically donated the aid to that organization, and then they would donate it back to organization that we were able to file pretty quickly in Ukraine called GEM Ukraine, right? So it had to like kind of switch hands to do it that way. Eventually we were registered in Poland as GEM Europe, right? And then we understood that T1 was a much easier way, right? And then you could just ship directly to Ukraine from GEM US to GEM Ukraine as the consignee. Then the other thing that's important is the first 6 months, we imported about 400 containers from the US and maybe 20% from Europe. And then we realized that a lot of that stuff could be sourced in Ukraine. So now we went from, our output has actually gone up 500% since those 6 months. It's gone up, not down. But everything is purchased now in Ukraine. And the costs of doing that are actually more efficient than importing it.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael. Viktor, question for you. Because you have experience with a logistics company, and now you're the logistics officer for the Territorial Defense Forces. So how do changing conflict dynamics affect the accessibility and safety of delivery routes to the front lines specifically?
Actually, in the beginning, the first 2 months of war, companies that I was working before delivering the weapon. We never did it before, but deliver the weapon because Russian invasion, you know, the east and north part, yeah, and the only way was to the west part, and we need to deliver that. And after these 2 months, we actually, for this day, don't care about any risks or something, because all people in Ukraine and all drivers who are driving the lorries and everything to the front line know how it's acting. But actually now, when we're delivering, for example, some military goods to the front line, we did it in unloading about 3 or 4 times. Why? It's easy, small, if you drop in, yeah. the goods, the first of all, and the second is security. Because if you have 3 or 4 main hubs, when you are unloading the goods that are coming from abroad, and then delivering partly to the front line is easy, you can do it at night, and it's safety. So this is the main idea how it's acting, logistic acting and delivering to the front line.
Thank you. Tamara, continuing the topic of also logistics and touching on what Michael said, which is sourcing in Ukraine, could you also touch a little bit on this question about where you source your products? Because your organization provides food. So first of all, why did you choose to do food? And also vegetarian food specifically, which is very interesting. But if you can also touch about logistics, I mean, I'm assuming you also get everything in Ukraine, but if not, please share.
Yeah, we started to contact our partner organizations in Europe, first of all, because they are much more experienced than we were. So we asked, like, what shall we do now? Can you give us some advice? And our associates from Hungary called out, and from England, Germany helps a lot. And first of all, they suggested that they deliver humanitarian aid, like trucks with the full foodstuff to Ukraine. And we did several tranches like that. But then we realized that it's much more costly to deliver something from Germany or Poland to Ukraine, and it will be easier for us to buy local products. So basically what we need is food products and some equipment. Equipment is more difficult question because we did not have much. If you want to deliver food fresh and warm, you need special insulated containers. And we started to approach different stakeholders if they can donate something already. Maybe they have something. So there were several successes. We got some kitchen equipment and food transportation equipment, but to be honest, it's still not enough. We want to expand more because we have potential. We have a very widespread network of volunteers who are ready, to jump in. We just need those resources, and we are still in the process of finding partners in that. Regarding why do we feed people and why do we feed with vegetarian food? We ourselves, at the beginning of the war, felt that we are devastated and frustrated about what is happening. I myself have an experience. The first day of the war, I couldn't do anything. Even I couldn't cook for myself, for my family. It was such a drastic, emotional and psychological devastation. I felt that I cannot even cook for myself, and I would be so much grateful if someone just bring that food to me. So it was one of my personal motivation to engage in that. And we felt that people who came through that hell, through the dread, they need just this simple, loving gesture of someone else. And we also admire Mother Teresa, who fed people all over the world and helped in the food relief missions. And she told that people are not only hungry for food, but they are hungry for love. So we took as our motto. We decided that, food is just a medium with which you can deliver that love to the people and make them feel valued. After such a dreadful experience they went through, we just try to bring that simple hope and humanness in them and make them feel valuable and worthy of decent living again. So we can have this philosophy underlined that just food distribution. So it's kind of subtle thing for us. And why we serve vegetarian? You know that you can consider vegetarianism, it can be substantiated from various perspectives, from economical point of view, environmental, health arguments are there. But for us, it's the most and foremost argument for vegetarianism is ethics. It's just about non-violence and about, we believe that we believe that violence brings about another violence. So it's ethical issue, and we bring together the like-minded people who believe the same, and we do this together, and also propagate this, that vegetarianism is a fully nutritious, fully healthy diet.
Thank you. Andrei, question for you. You've been involved for a long time, and you're based in New York. So when people started, they were like, okay, we need to help. I know that you received a lot of calls, a lot of emails, a lot of texts about what do we do and how do we do it. And so as this has been ongoing, as the conflict continues, what are some of the logistical challenges that people have approached you with? How do we get this there? How do we get this to the right people? And how are you connecting them with other people? Because you're almost like a fantastic switchboard.
One of the things that probably all of us on the panel are familiar with is that the needs have changed over time. You mentioned the security situation has changed over time as the war progresses, and that's something that you constantly have to be responding to. I was on the ground with the George Pataki Center in Ukraine in March of 2022, and they already were witnessing that the United Nations was slow because they were delivering tents that were needed right at the beginning of the war, but they were only delivered after they need them. Similarly, many needs, the further you go from Ukraine, so Poland, Hungary, Slovakia, there are countries closer that can respond quicker to the needs, but once you start to ship stuff from the United States, it becomes a longer logistical issue. Especially at the beginning of the war, people were bringing things over directly on flights. The more you want to ship, the less cost-effective that is. So then you start looking at shipping lanes. Once October hit in that year, we know that a lot of shipping lanes closed down, so we're not using the Great Lakes in the United States. You have to change your destination and reroute stuff. You also have to start consolidating. So what ended up happening in the United States is there was a network of different humanitarian organizations across all 50 states. As time goes on, local donations from businesses shrunk to the point where some organizations did not have a full container, or they did not have a full shipment to go out. So we started doing networking calls every week to know, well, I have a guy in Miami who's ready to clear out his warehouse. Do you have somebody in Atlanta who's ready to ship in this coming month? And then we can combine a shipment. And that's how it really worked throughout the rest of the world. But again, a lot of that has to do with people, wanting to do something personal, and then we can give them feedback directly to say, please stop bringing diapers to a church in the middle of the East Village, because that's really not helpful right now. And you can do cash right now, because cash can really go to whether directly to Ukraine or a neighboring country where the aid can come faster. So I think you hit the nail on the head when you earlier mentioned that things really do change. It's not, when Michael mentioned that containers were coming in the first month, I think probably some of the same conversations we were having is that some local leaders didn't know if placing a container anywhere was even safe, because they didn't know what was going to be bombed in those first couple of months.
Going off of that, I want to talk about the safety of your volunteers and the people that work with your organizations. And I'm very happy Viktor's here, because I think that at one point, all of our organizations have worked with the armed forces of Ukraine in some way, one or another. And so my question, well, I'll start with Michael, and then again, I want to go to kind of everyone with this question, just briefly. What are you doing, and how do you ensure the safety of your volunteers, especially working in direct conflict zones?
Can you repeat that? Sorry.
Oh, sorry. So how do you ensure the safety of your volunteers? What are you doing? What are the steps you take to make sure that everyone that works for your organization, when they're out, when they're taking supplies, that they're safe from start to finish?
So we have delivered almost 2,000 truckloads directly to the front line to date. We, knock on wood, still have not had one incident. That's a lot of praying. And we have to be very surgical in those situations, right? So this is not something that you announce. This is not something that you post until, after it's done. You bring in a truck from your main warehouse, right, in the center of the country, basically to somewhere 10, 20 kilometers from the front line, and you have small vans. Some are armored. You unload from the big truck into the small van, and the small van goes in with basically only local leaders, military leaders, that pull you in, and you have about, I'm not exaggerating, 10 minutes to unload 200-300 boxes, hand them to people, and get out of there. And many, many times, 20 minutes later, there's been an explosion in that area because they radio in. There's spies that are always calling someone, sending drones or surveillance. There's Russian drones flying all over that front line at all times, taking pictures of everything. So it's quite risky. You have to be very, very careful. And, we have a really good team. I mean, everyone that's on our team is Ukrainian. They know the territory, the land so well. And we're just dealing with, people that their souls are on fire to do this, and nothing could stop them.
Christine, how do you, so you're doing training in frontline zones, and how are you then going in with your teams and making sure that, hey, be safe, but you're also training civilians in buildings that essentially become targets when they're filled with civilians for trainings. So how do you ensure their safety?
I think a lot of the methods and the practices that Michael has mentioned are the same ones that we would employ. I think one of the superpowers of our organization, right, is, and I'm talking on behalf of our guys and gals, right? Like, they are quiet professionals that have spent 20 years in combat. They know how to get to the front lines. They know how to operate on the front lines. And so they know all of these security measures, which you really explained them well without giving too much away, right? And it's your local partners that are critical and key as well, because they know how to egress and ingress, like they know how to come in and come out. It also shows how much deliberate process and planning has to take place, and how arduous the infrastructure that you have to maintain in order to keep your folks safe, because you can't use the same vehicles all the time, right? And you don't want to have a pattern that can be spotted by the adversary. The adversary is ruthless, takes asymmetrical, is asymmetrical, will come after, does not abide by the law of armed conflict, right? So humanitarian aid is a target in this conflict, which is shocking. But we do a lot of the same things, and it's careful and deliberate, and it is also an impediment, right, for the nonprofit world and those of us that are trying to resource ourselves, because you can't be overtly on social media, at least in our case, right? We're not going to overly publicize where we are and what we're doing, especially when we're training critical infrastructure staffs, railroads, energy structures. We don't want anyone to know where we've been or who's been trained up, where our medical supplies are based. Thanks.
Viktor, can I go to you, because as with the armed forces, do you work with organizations like the ones that are up here and ensuring that they're safe? Do they talk to you? Do you communicate? Do you work on the logistics together?
Look, Oliver, the Mike told the correct scheme of delivering. It's correct, absolutely. Everybody acting like that because there is no other way to acting. But if you're saying truly safety, it's impossible. Truly saying we couldn't guarantee nothing because this is a war. So I will tell it's not safety, it's lucky. Because in 20 minutes, if you got bombed, some kind of place where you unloaded, it's lucky, it's not safety. We can only talk about safety. But reasonably, it's absolutely unexpected because you couldn't know the rocket or bomb you launch in this truck or rail station. So the main reason that the people who are working in Ukraine must accept no safety, lucky, and you're doing your best. This is the main parts or reasons you are working in Ukraine.
Tamara, in your intro video, I saw that the cooking you're doing is sometimes it's right there, it's on the ground. So that means you're not there like Michael for 10 minutes. You're staying there and you're doing the cooking, you're handing out the food. How do you do that to ensure the safety of your aid workers and beneficiaries during the cooking, during the delivery, during the handing out of the food?
To be honest, we do not do much about security. We have some successes in Kharkiv and Dnipro, where our volunteers managed to get the bulletproof vests, and they have the helmets and the first aid kits. In Dnipro, they collaborated with the hospitaliers who teach them a course of a first aid. But basically, that's it. We ensure security just the rest of the citizens. When there is an air raid, we go to the bomb shelter. And so we cannot provide the full security. We take risk. And now I think our organization is on the stage of this missionary fervor. We just go forward, and people are fearless. But it's a reasonable question. We do have to take care of the security of our volunteers, and this is where we will seek the partnerships with someone who can assist us in that. Our kitchen where we cook in Kherson was damaged after shelling, and we did not renovate it after that. So our volunteers had to move the whole kitchen to a private facility. So they organized the whole field kitchen in the empty swimming pool of a private house, can you imagine? And right at the day they moved to that private house, which was nicely provided by some person, the artillery shelling started near Kherson. And we have a video even of our volunteers cooking in the yard of the house, and the missiles are just whistling over their heads. And they are jumping, smiling, and just continuing their thing. I mean, I admire those people, the work they do, and their spirit. But it's a really reasonable thing we should do take care of is the security of our volunteers, and we seek help in that.
Andrei, question for you, because you talked about the Pataki Center in the answer to your first question, which I'm not sure if everyone's familiar with, so I'd love it if you introduce your work with them just a little bit.
Sure.
And also because you work with a lot of organizations, and so what are the security risks that people are coming to you with? I know you also travel with the organizations into Ukraine quite often. So who are you going to for, hey, Andrei, we want to go do this, and then they're going, Andrei, can you help us with this, 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 and this, including security concerns?
And the first thing, you don't tell your wife right away, but then you tell her later that you're going to Kiev. But the George Pataki Center, a former governor of New York, three-term governor of New York, had a charitable organization in Hungary since his grandfather came over from Hungary. And so he really wanted to be on the ground as soon as the war broke out. He had Americans of Ukrainian descent working for him for a very long time, and he was on the ground within the first month. And then he invited me to come along because of my experience in Zakarpattia to meet with the governor there, meet with the local organizations on the ground. And he quickly established a network reaching towards strong Catholic connections of his with the Order of Malta, who had a network emanating from Budapest towards the east of Hungary, and then started setting up in Ivano-Frankivsk, not just Zakarpattia, but further out as much as possible. So it's about leveraging who you know. Similarly, in the way that many of us here started working with those that they know, For the Pataki Center, it was the former governor leveraging his associations. And for our community organizations, both at the World Congress throughout the world, whether you're in Australia or you're anywhere in the United States, from Miami to Hawaii, you know somebody on the ground, you know mayors, you know city council people. You've been working with them many have been working with them since 2014. I know so many women of a certain age who should be focusing on, dressing their children for folk dancing, but instead they know the best kind of Kevlar to have in a helmet. And many of them have actually been in constant contact with medics from 2014 and 2015, even throughout this intermediary period when people said that the war has kind of calmed down. They've been in constant contact. So cities and community churches all around the world have been adopting individual brigades and service people. So when the war broke out, and even before the war, they were able to communicate in terms of what kind of needs are. But as far as your question about being remaining safe, it's about going there yourself. So if Task Force Antal is on the ground, the Governor Pataki's on the ground, when I have events coming up, we can explain them to people what it is to travel towards a country as big as Ukraine, what it's like to travel when the electricity goes down and you don't have lights on the highway and you have a mandatory hour curfew at night. So it's those kind of logistics problems that you need to explain to people and reassure them that when organizations like the World Federation of Ukrainian Medical Professionals decided to visit Ukraine at the end of December 2022, they were prepared because many of their members had already gone into the country to volunteer at hospitals throughout the year. So it's all about experience in terms of being safe.
Michael, I would like to go to you with a question because we talked about getting it in and out, 10 minutes, but your operation is huge, and so you have warehousing all over the place, and whether the warehousing is next to Lviv, whether it's outside of Kyiv, those are all potential targets. And so and I don't want to, not to get too much into it because I know there's safety concerns with discussing this information, but I'm curious, how do you maintain warehouses? How do you ensure warehouses? How do you make sure your goods are do you spread them out? How do you do that to make sure that aid can still be used and they're not just targets that are there?
Yeah, thank you. So when I said we reduced the imports, right? So what we did is we looked at food securities. We looked at the situation with the Odessa ports and all this stuff going on, and we decided to basically invest in supporting those farmers. So 100% of the food that we distribute now, which is an enormous amount, by the way, it's 200 18-wheelers per month just for the front line of Ukrainian food. So we empower the farmers. They grow the wheat, the macaroni, the barley, all the different products. They go to a warehouse, approximately 6,000 pallets a month of Ukrainian food gets turned over, it gets packaged, and then it gets brought to the front line. Insurance, no, doesn't exist. That's just the reality of it, right? And let's just talk about economics though, right? So that money, let's call it $2.5 million that you're gonna spend a month buying food. When you divide that up about what our cost is, right? We call it farm to front line. We alleviate every single middleman that we can because our responsibility is to our donors and to get the most bang for the buck, right? Even World Food Program, much larger organizations, are not able to do it at that price. We can get a box with 20 pounds of food packaged, delivered to 1 kilometer in the front line, including every single subsidized cost, warehouse, everything, for about $14 a box. Think about that math a little bit, right? And that's because you cut out all those expenses. So from a safety risk, there's, like he said, it's a war. I mean, it's a war. There's nothing you could do about it, Like I said, prayer is probably the best thing you can do. And we don't deliver I would say maybe 20%. The other 80% is direct to the hands of people. Because when you drop stuff off at a local hub, then the accountability on that is very questionable, right? It becomes gray, you know? Who in that hub is gonna give it to their friends or cousins? There are gonna be preferences, all of that stuff. So we basically go frontline, warehouse, the box, you can see the videos, hands to the person in those villages.
Are you so just a question to follow up this? Are you minimizing time and like are you focused on minimizing time in every spot? So when the food gets to the warehouse, get it in, get it out, turn it out.
I think when you're 1 to 2 kilometers from the front line, you're within like short fire range, right? So it's extremely dangerous. That means if someone could basically see you with binoculars, they can, you know, shoot at you directly. So that's extremely dangerous. So when you're in those areas, you got to be in and out. When you're 5, 10 kilometers from the front line, right, that means that someone has to actually, you know, radio in from a drone, figure out where your trucks are, and then, you know, send a missile to hit your truck, right? It's a lot of stuff to go on. But like I said, it's happened. I've arrived in squares on the front line. The mayor says, you know, that's why I keep saying pray. The mayor says, this is where we're going to do the distribution. I got like a little heart thing. I'm like, this doesn't feel right. I was like, load, get out of here. And literally we leave and it gets a hit, right? So it's just prayer.
Christine, your supplies are different in nature because it's not food. They need storage and they need to be shipped from other countries. So can you talk about your challenges with shipping, with warehousing, and I know that you spoke to me privately about trying to source from other places, but can you touch on why your goods are coming from where they are and how that works?
So our medical director and our medical program advisory board, they're very particular about the medical supplies we bring in because they're not going to put our name on them without knowing that it is the creme de la creme of medical product. That's just the world that we come from. And all of our guys, my husband's been shot twice in combat. All of my friends that have suffered in combat are alive because of the medical supplies that they use right at the point of right on the X, right at the front line. So we have very high standards on our medical supplies, and we work with partner organizations in the United States to get those at as much at cost. And then we work with other organizations to help with the transportation costs. But to Michael's point, we can't insure anything, right? Like once we leave our warehousing in Hungary, we are no longer insured. So we do creative leapfrogging and lily padding of our supplies, and we don't cluster, which adds to cost, right? And adds to the complication of our process, but it's a process we're also very used to doing. We're longtime professionals in this area, and so we're comfortable with it. And our donors are too, but you do have to walk them through, like, why could a transportation cost be so much? Yeah, I think that's my answer.
Viktor, can I ask, because you went from logistics to armed forces, and so when this conflict started, a lot of people wanted to get involved, they wanted to help. And so I'm sure that you saw a lot of mistakes that were being made about how to get aid to the right place, how to do it efficiently, how the logistics will work. Can you share some of the mistakes that you saw, some of the issues you saw with trying to get help into the right place, especially when the conflict started, to now?
Oliver, you know, after the war starting, all other things, I mean mistake, is a secondary, because everybody who stay in the country and save the country don't think even about the risky, don't think even about the mistake, thinking only the one reason for victory, to save the country. Because I'm not even remember what kind of mistake it was. I just remember the cases we had, and that's it. So the cases because we are now fighting not only with the enemy, we are fighting with the time. So time for war is the main case. For example, when it was the battlefield for the Kiev, Ukrainian experts and international experts say in one word that Russians lose the battle for Kiev because of bad logistic communication. Logistic in this war is, let's say, not number one, but number two. Due to logistic, Russians lose Kiev battlefield, and now we are shooting, and before our Ukrainian counter-offensive is going, the Ukrainian artillery shooting all logistic places, staff, warehouses, roads, and so on. So logistic in the second place, and you just need to do it. We don't thinking about any mistake, because people do mistake, it's normal. In a war, mistake, it can be your life. So you accept it or not accept it. This is the main point.
Thank you, Viktor. Tamara, I have a question for you about your, so I want to touch on your stakeholders a little bit, and also how do you work with your stakeholders? How do you decide where you're going? How do you communicate that? How do you decide where's the need? Where are we going to be? Because we talked about the safety aspect of it, but also what goes into that decision making and how that works for you.
We cooperate with the local military administrations, and they mostly, in most of the cases, they direct us to, then you go here. They also tell people there that we are coming. They provide a lot of help in that regard. We partner with other organizations who help us with the warehouses. We also need that. We don't have ours, so we used private businesses offered us their storages, and also other charities. They helped us to store at the border when we reloaded the trucks with the food products. Some organizations also assist us with transportation to different places. When we distribute in the cities, they can, like Dobra Sprava, Janholy, numerous times they helped us to deliver to people with disabilities. They know where those people are, where is the need, so we consulted them. But what we noticed from our perspective, on the front line, you can call it either famine or feast, as they call it. So at one place as we come and we see that there are full trucks of aid, and we feel like there is no need for us being here because it's already so much provided for people. But in other places we come and people are really starving, So what we see is there are no unified kind of a map of problems. There was no assessment made of a real situation on the front line. It would be of a great help if we, the charities and other organizations, join forces and create that kind of map. So for us, it would be easier to really be there where it is the most needed, not just point a finger, in some place.
Michael, go ahead. Do you want to chime in?
Yeah,
Please.
I could chime in on that. So, so the way it works, right? There's about 900 villages and towns along that 600-mile stretch that we support ourselves. Every single one of those towns, there's a representative, a mayor, or someone in authority that has basically the data. How many people were in this town? How many people evacuated? How many people are left? And the first question I ask every single one of them is, what are you getting from WFP? What are you getting from World Central Kitchen? What are you getting combined? I total it in my head. So you're missing X, right? And then we supply that void. And there's many towns, that's why out of the 980, we only support 300 a month, that they tell me, we're good. WFP handles this, or WCK was just here, we have enough food, and we skip that, right? So I'm not sure organizations getting together, there's so many different organizations, are gonna have the exact same data than the actual, government people that are like actually receiving it for their town that knows. I think it's about just communicating with them better and having that, right? They are the key to all of this. Like the last thing I want to say is, there's a lot of cowboys in this thing. I support all groups, all humanitarians. I think everyone should help the world, right? In this particular case, as an expert who's been doing this for 23 years, this is one of the most dangerous things on the planet to do. And if you are not guided in those areas by like military, who is literally telling you the Russian tanks are half a kilometer away, they're moving in, we gotta go, and you're not inside that intel, you're going to get killed. And it happens, and you see humanitarians all the time making mistakes like that and losing their lives. It's not worth it. So if you're gonna do this, do it right, please, and coordinate properly with local government.
I want to ask Christine the question about this as well, because as someone who's been with the military, with different countries' military, but active in the military, you've seen this as well, and I know you've mentioned the cowboy aspect of this. Can you touch on this and discuss this as well? Because I think a lot of people want to help, and I completely agree with Michael. They want to help, but if you just go in there like a cowboy, I mean, you're endangering yourself and everyone else.
So I think we're far enough away from the initial invasion that I can share a little bit of our anecdotes, right? Our organization, my husband and I had zero idea that we were going to be here or be in this space as a nonprofit. We started with a response to Afghanistan, and it was because we had this synergy of national security legal advisor and special operations folks who can get things done in contested environments. And so in Afghanistan, when we got the call to help with US citizens stuck and partner forces, we all mobilized by cell phone. And we were able to be extremely effective on the ground and extremely quiet because we're not cowboys, I'd like to think, right? But we also watched the cowboys on the battlefield, and we also watched the adversary that we're currently up against, setting traps and watching very carefully what the cowboy organizations were doing in Afghanistan. That informed them about what they figured the response would be by good-hearted organizations wanting to go in and help. So at the beginning of the war, specifically in our case, we were extremely deliberate about how far we went in, where we went in, and who went in, because our folks have a profile. And we didn't want to escalate or antagonize. And we also were very, at the beginning, concerned that they would purposely go after folks that were not deliberately planning, right? And that they would set traps for that, and that would escalate this conflict even more by bringing more, by harming humanitarian actors. So I agree wholeheartedly, folks need to be deliberate in planning. They need to coordinate specifically with local authorities, and they need to be fully aware that we are in a contested environment. We are in a war zone. It's not the same as a soup kitchen at home in the US, at least in our cases. I don't know if that helps completely answer anything, but.
Well, I'd like also Viktor to comment, because I asked you about mistakes. So this is not now about mistakes, but I want to keep going with the cowboy aspect of this, because sort of as as sort of a warning to people to say, hey, it's great that you want to help. That's fantastic, but make sure you're doing it the right way. And so my question then for you, Viktor, is are you sometimes just seeing something you didn't know what was happening, and people are just like, we're here to help, we've brought aid, and it's like, what you're in danger, you're not doing this correctly.
It was, Oliver, it was in the beginning, nobody knows what to do, because after 2 months, everybody clearly what's happening, and now it's using normally. Actually, we are a military organization, yeah? Non-profit, yeah? Non-military organization. And we are not acting with civilian people, yeah? We can only help them. Help them in what way? For example, we are not allowed to secure the goods that are going. For example, yeah, jam going to the front line and asking, hey, TDF, can you secure the goods with some people with that? Of course not. We are military, we are not a security company or something else. We are not allowed in, even if it's some big organization. But unofficially, of course, we dividing each other information. Because, you know, in 1.5 years of war, you are even don't think of risk or you're laughing under the risk. And we are saying that if you have the information, you're alive. If you don't have the information, you're dead. Just choose, and that's it. Yeah. So our main task, of course, it's the military defending. Military task is defending, and to the civilian or humanitarian companies, we can help only with information directly on the front lines. Because behind, on the second line, third line, is actually using working like normal business, like or something like that.
Andre, still cowboys. Okay, we're still talking about it because I think it's a fascinating topic because we've also seen it, and so people call you, Andre, we're going, we're doing it. You know, you have the Ukrainian ancestry. Let's go, we're going. How do you deal with it?
The number one thing is constantly listening. So if people aren't listening to Tamara, then they're not doing their job, because it doesn't help when you're a cowboy on the ground. If you're a cowboy with your ideas of what I think Ukraine needs, it's listening and constantly reacting. And Michael is right. If you're not, one of the issues about the idea of having a coordinating of needs and stuff, that is going to be, as my first remarks were, constantly outdated if you're not talking and listening to the local people on a daily or as often basis. So first and foremost, whether you're a politician in the West, if you're or if you're humanitarian, you have to constantly be listening to people, not just the volunteers on the ground, but also the security forces, TDF as well, like Viktor, because we have to remember that you've heard Tamara's kitchen was destroyed. Michael had his truck get out right before something happening. Caritas just had an entire warehouse blown up of humanitarian supplies, and civilian, whether it's civilian lives or civilian infrastructure, is constantly being attacked during this war. And it's a very different war than what the West has been used to. You know, going back to 2014, this war has constantly been fed by local farmers. We're just scaling it up now to make sure, like Michael says, you cut out the middlemen and just go directly. But Tamara's experience specifically is what I saw when I crossed over that first month. There are some local products that you can get from a garden, but at some point the sunflower oil just wasn't there, or stuff that's processed, and that's the stuff that we could ship in from outside by listening to the local people and their needs. But that kind of stuff, again, is, if you don't listen to your security forces, if you don't listen to Task Force Antal, and you're not listening to if the cowboy is not listening to the air raid alert. I've been on some trips where people said, why can't we visit people during an air raid alert? And you're not going to visit somebody during an air raid alert because they're going to be in the basement. And there's not going to be an opportunity for you to have a visit in that area. So constantly listening is the best way to combat cowboyness.
Michael, did you want to add? I saw you grab the microphone, but I'm going to ask you a question. So do you want to add to that, or can I ask you a question?
Yeah, the only thing I'll add is, without exaggerating, I could say over 500 times our teams have planned a mission at night with the local government. And before arriving, just to show you, like to make this point, the local government will say, it's too hot now, we have to move now to a different area in today's distribution, right? So imagine that. But imagine if you didn't get that intel, you would literally drive right into hell.
I want to touch on this last topic a little bit, because even since I've been at this conference, there's things that I've heard about, you know, the challenges of getting aid to the right places in Ukraine. You know, oh, it's not getting there. It's not going to the right place. And we've heard this from a lot of people. And so, as everyone here is active on front lines, I'd like to ask, are there administrative obstacles? Are there bureaucratic obstacles? Is what you want getting to where it needs to go? Or are you sensing this? What's your experience? What are the obstacles? Because you mentioned, Michael, 900 towns, villages that are there. how on earth are you taking this many places and being able to say, okay, this. That's a lot of administrations, a lot of politics. And so I'm wondering how you all deal with this.
That's exactly why we don't just hearsay and give them a present and drop a whole bunch of, $100,000 truckload off to some hub, right? That's why we give it straight to the people. If the people are in line and they're begging for it, they obviously need it, right? Plus we have a ticket service, meaning they have to be screened, right? They have to, be in the neighborhood, have, all those proper procedures are put into place. When we first started, we were based in Jeshu, and we were bringing aid. Just getting aid to Lviv, in March 2022 was like a big accomplishment, right? Because it was a whole different scenario. And eventually, we decided not to bring aid to Lviv anymore, and then we decided not to bring aid to basically most of the country other than that entire front line anymore. It's kind of a waste of resources. Again, we live in Kyiv. Like, Kyiv is a fully functional city like Warsaw with every single thing that's open there, shopping malls and everything. So that's not really what's needed in Kyiv, right? So you're taking resources for nothing. It's kind of not the best use of funds, right? It's much more needed in the areas like that. On top of that, there are a lot of places being deoccupied right now. There's small little villages, right? A lot of them are empty, but people are returning back now to those villages. They haven't been demined yet, so that's another reason why you can't be a cowboy and just like drive in with your, unsecured Lexus, because you're gonna get blown up. And so all these things are just, important practices that everyone needs to understand before they get into something like this.
Tamara, can I ask also about your obstacles and how do you work with the administrations? Is it easy? Is it hard? Are you getting the aid to the right places?
As far as my knowledge goes, what I've heard from the volunteers from the places we reported, in most of the cases, the local administrations are favorable to them. So they provide premises and also donate some food stuff. I only heard about an issue in Uzhgorod. For a long time, we were negotiating with the authorities and asked for a facility for cooking and storing, but they were not interested at all, and for a long time we were trying, and then just we abandoned that idea finally. We went to another place. Uzhgorod was relevant at the beginning of the war. There were a lot of refugees there. Yeah, we were distributing a lot. The first month we were distributing the railway stations, and then to be more sustainable we had to find some facilities and places. So it was some problems were there, but at the rest of the places I did not hear about.
Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, I forgot to say there is someone wrote us an email the other day, Majel knows, and they said we went to a distribution and the town, city, said, we can't have one of your boxes unless we pay our utility bills. And we found out about that, and we crushed that town, basic head, and basically told them this is completely unacceptable. Two separate things. Of course they can't pay their electric bill. How are they gonna pay it? They're in the middle of a war zone. They don't have any income. It's not their fault they got a box. And so that is the only one that I'm aware of that occurred, and we nipped it immediately. We make the rules also, because otherwise,
Absolutely. Christine, do you want to touch on this subject? It's bureaucratic processes, challenges. Is the aid getting to where you need it to go? Or are you providing your training? Sorry.
I think for us it is, but we're we have a small outfit, right? I'm so curious and so inspired actually by hearing Michael's, and learning so much more about Michael's organization, because I do think on our microcosm view of things in Ukraine, and certainly with our relationships, we are very comfortable that our end users are who we want them to be, and that it is in compliance with both what our donors expect and also international law and code of ethics, right? We have not as an organization experienced we have not been asked to, we haven't had to compromise, but I also think it has something to do with our network and our team. I'm looking at some of our host nation team here. We know where we're going, we've vetted the folks that we're going to, and then we continue to layer on that. But yeah, no, so it's really interesting to listen to the panelists here and understand that all of us are working towards the same end user, or to the right end users, and that we all have fairly positive experiences.
Michael, go ahead.
Yeah, and Brock, I want to mention, right, put in place, right, best practices yesterday. And so that's really important. So just without exaggerating, we have a like armoire filled probably as big as this whole back wall, and it's got binders. And every single binder in it is a sheet of paper that basically has the signature of a mayor or someone in a town that basically we have received 1,276 boxes on this date, right? And then we have a file with every single distribution picture of that, right? So those are called best practices. It's accountability. And that gets reported, believe it or not, to the central government, which actually reviews all these things, right? And it gets audited. So it's important, right? Because you have to, if you're going to import $100 million worth of aid, that's your inflow. You better have proof that you gave $100 million out and where, right? Because otherwise, somewhere in the middle, it's going to get lost. And that's not donor responsibility.
Viktor, combining this question, again, one of the I want to combine it with something else, because one of the themes that we've heard and one of the questions that we're asked is, now it's almost October in what, 2 days. So winter is coming. And so what are, this shifts, I think, all the logistical challenges for everyone on stage of how do we get it to front lines? How do we get it to where it needs to go? What challenges does winter pose specifically, and how does it shift all your needs, all your requirements for everything that you need in the towns, villages up near the front?
This winter or last winter will be absolutely the same, but approximate the government, the military guys telling that the blackout can be harder than the last year. So of course, generators, power banks, and everything in connection with that are needed for sure, because the energetic system of Ukraine are not so strong. From the last time, it's not recovered. The first point. The second point, logistic is acting all over the year. That is 24/7. We don't have any chance not acting totally. Where the period when there was bombing the fuel station and fuel factories, yeah, it was a big deficit of fuels, but still in that period we survived, yeah. So we are not even thinking about that, because we know how to act in. If you don't have the fuel, or fuel will not going through the factories, you need to bring it abroad. So I am telling that the logistic will work in any case. So no problem with that at all. What needed, I can tell our needs specifically in the military part. Yeah, for example, how is we can connect it to the humanitarian. We need APC, it's armed personnel carrier, machines or vehicles that we can deliver the wounded people from the front line to the second line. We are delivering not only the wounded soldiers, we are delivering the wounded civil people, because the TDF is staying on the front line. For example, in Donetsk region, TDF is the main defense forces there. Yeah, and we critically need this APC because one of the cases 1 month ago, one of the brigade APC was destroyed totally, and they were evacuated wounded people on a bicycle. Can you imagine that? But what you can do, you just bombed everything and people are lying on the front line. Once more, it's not the soldiers only, it's the civilian people. So this is the main now needed of APC, of TDF, yeah, it's APC vehicles, and of course the ambulances. These ambulances we're working with Ukrainian focus very good, and still waiting the ambulance from that. So it's our needed at this time. All other stuff, some first aid kit, generators or other stuff, we don't care because, don't care because we have it enough, yeah, and we're now thinking over the defending of the territories. And the humanitarian are doing all the other stuff, thanks them, of course.
Which I think is good to know, because I think that a lot of people are they think, okay, well, winter, we need more generators, we need more this, but if that's something, okay, we have them, we just need to defend them, that's important for the attendees, I think, to know.
Yeah, one of the tasks, when the TDF was, I think in each country, TDF is acting with the civil people, yeah? And one of the tasks of TDF, for example, in USA, is defending your territory. But due to TDF in Ukraine, is the new forces, yeah, and we need people who can fight on the front line. We go TDF, go from the old cities to the front line, yeah. And of course, one of our tasks is still the task to be care of the people, but the people who are on the front line. Because, for example, tank forces couldn't act in with the civil people, yeah, it's absolutely impossible. So generators and other stuff, yeah, we are also giving to the civil people, but for, like, say, for renting, not for renting, for some period of that.
Michael and Tamara, I'm going to ask both of you this question. Just with winter, how are you shifting? What are you shifting to? Does it pose any challenges to you? Because again, your logistical operation is huge, and so you I think, are more impacted by the weather, I would think, but maybe not. So I'll ask, and then also I'd like to ask Tamara the same question.
Yeah, so last winter, I think we distributed over 1,000 generators. Thank God we have really good partners, so that had to be imported, obviously, right? A lot of them we sourced in Europe, and then from all over the world. We were lucky to have great, smart partnerships with companies like Delta, so, you know, and like Delta First Class and stuff, those like white blankets, we got like 50,000, 100,000 of them, right? So we made the box bigger, that box that we have in the video. In the winter, it's like 6 inches higher and has a folded blanket in the top, right? So that's what we do. This year, it's harder to get free $100,000 blankets because there's donor fatigue, and, you know, I can't get that many anymore. So that's an issue. I'm not sure we'll be able to do that many generators. Hopefully they still have them from next year, right? Because when you're going into Avdiivka and places like that, there's basically, as you know, a couple thousand people hiding in bunkers that will not leave. They have to have generators, heaters, blankets, all that. You know, they'll freeze to death over there. So it's very dangerous. And our window program is probably the most important light-saving, you know, thing that I think we do. You don't really think about it. It's a big deal, right? But most of those windows have been, you know, cracked or crushed from vibration. So we replace, we really replace about 6,000 windows per month, right? And we have whole teams that are just doing that. And if you don't do that, those people will either become IDPs, refugees, right? They'll be in the US, or they'll freeze to death in their apartment. So that investment of that $300 window prevents them from having to leave and do that. And they want to stay where they are. So yes, you completely shift. And the last thing I'll say is, you know, we run our own logistics, right? It is not something either that I recommend. I would always recommend, like his company, for example, because the amount of money that it costs to basically buy trucks, operate them, manage them, track them, maintenance, right, gas, all of that, when you look at that at the end of the year, it's almost actually the same thing. It only works in super large scale. When we have 12 trucks leaving the warehouse per day and they're running back and forth nonstop like UPS, then it makes sense. But if you start doing your own logistics, right, because we have to have winter vehicles now, like MANs, those big, you know, we can't use the little Volkswagen van with the little wheels in the winter. You got to use the ones with the big tires and 4x4s and all those type of things, right? So if you're going to do it in the winter, use a logistical company. They're going to have all the equipment. It's going to save you a lot of money.
Tamara, same question. Winter, how do you deal with it?
Yeah, first of all, we will just continue doing what we do, you know, relentlessly, we won't stop. As stability is important. As Michael just said, we can see the donor fatigue. And that is true. When the danger subsides in some places, a lot of donors, they leave. But we want to stay there with the people because they won't wait for big governmental programs to save them. They need people right here every day, and that's what we can do, and we will continue with that. Also, we observe certain volunteer fatigue as well in our organization, especially taking into account that so far 99% of our volunteers, they do not receive any payment for what they do. We are like, hopeless cowboys. As you said, we will definitely work on motivating our people, on taking care of them, and our organizational capacity. We have a policy that our people, the volunteers who work with us, they are not means to an end, but they are our goal itself. So first of all, we want to take care of our team, of our volunteers, to make them fulfilled with that care, to be able to bring it further to the wider society so that they do not burn out. We already experienced that, and a lot of volunteers, of course, they don't have just much time for volunteering. They have their families, they have to earn for living. And our decision is engaging more people who do less rather than have a full-time person to burn out. But this is our the sphere to work on motivating people so that they do not go. For that winter, we also have a plan to cooperate with the invincibility centers in the cities. They are already settled, so the only thing we need is just to agree that we will distribute our food there in those centers. And also we had a very, it's a high idea, very, for us, maybe not practical at the moment, but what we want, together with our fellow medical volunteers, we had an idea to organize a small mobile groups consisting of the medical people and us to go to the villages, to the occupied villages, and feed people right there on the spot. But for that, we need some portable field kitchens, which we don't have yet, and this is a big thing. Yeah, and we still need generators, of course. We have some. We got donated from our different stakeholders, but yeah, we are cowboys, we are grassroots, we are enthusiasts, and we need all kinds of support. What we have, we have this vibe, a spirit, and readiness to really help in the fields.
Thank you. I'm watching the time closely. Michael, I'll give you the last word. I also want to give Viktor a chance if he wants to respond. And then if there's any questions, please let us know. We can do, I think we have time. I'm looking at Claudia over there, but maybe we have time for a question or two. But Michael, go ahead.
I just wanted to congratulate, people like you. I think that it's like all by divine order, right? And everybody gets put into their power because of these things, right? And sometimes the snake like Putin, the positive coin of this, right, is there's so many people like you that have emerged out of this and have stepped into their power, And I just want to tell you that, we really appreciate everything that everyone in this whole entire conference, right, is doing, because it's a lot of effort and dedication, and money is completely dry, and it's difficult. And I myself every single person is walking up to us, asking us to fund them and stuff. I know how hard it is to get funding, and just keep it up and just keep doing what you're doing, and if we can help you with that equipment, we'll talk after, okay?
Thank you, Michael.
Yeah. I think we could talk about, donor fatigue is something we could definitely continue talking about, because I've heard it from my ears have picked it up from a lot of places. But Viktor, I want to give you the closing word, and go ahead, please.
30 seconds. Ukraine unlucky and lucky in the same time. Why? Unlucky because of the war, and lucky because we have no other chance to win. When the person or people or country has no chance, they are going straight ahead. So stay with Ukraine. Thank you that you are with us, because our heart beating thanks you. And Slava Ukraini!
Thank you, everyone. Thank you to all the panelists. Thank you, Andrei, Tamara, Michael, Christine, and thank you, Viktor. Thank you so much. Thank you. I don't think we have time for questions, but our panelists will be here, and they'll be available to answer questions. Thank you.